Hello, brave explorers of faith, and welcome to a new story that will change the way you look at obstacles. Today, we travel back in time to a promised land, to a moment of great trials and impossible miracles, to discover one of the most astonishing lessons on courage, obedience, and the power of faith. This is the story of a people who reached the end of their long journey, only to find a wall that reached the heavens. And it is the story of a new leader who had to learn to trust a plan that no one could understand. This is the story of Joshua and the Fall of Jericho. After 40 years in the desert, the people of Israel had finally arrived. Before them lay the land God had promised, a land flowing with milk and honey. But standing between them and their destiny was a formidable fortress, the city of Jericho. Its walls were no ordinary stone. They were colossal, so wide that houses could be built atop them, and so high they seemed to scrape the clouds. From the heights, the guards of Jericho looked down at the Israelite camp and laughed. They felt invincible, protected by a rampart that no army had ever managed to conquer. In the heart of the Israelite camp, one man felt the weight of an entire nation on his shoulders. His name was Joshua. The great prophet Moses, who had led them out of Egypt and through the Red Sea, was gone. Now, the mantle of leadership belonged to him. Every night, Joshua gazed at the walls of Jericho, and doubt, like a cold shadow, tried to creep into his heart. He knew that with swords and spears, the battle was lost before it even began. He needed a miracle. And so, with the humility of a servant and the desperation of a leader, he prayed for an answer. And the answer came. It wasn't a thunderclap or a bolt of lightning. It was a clear, direct instruction from God. A battle plan unlike any other in human history. A plan that defied all military logic and known strategy. God told Joshua that victory would not be found in the strength of his warriors, but in the strength of their obedience. They were not to sharpen their swords or prepare their battering rams. Instead, they were to prepare their feet for walking and their lungs for silence. This was the plan. For 6 days, the entire army of Israel, led by 7 priests carrying trumpets made of ram's horns, was to march around the towering city of Jericho just once each day. And most importantly, they were to do so in complete and absolute silence. Not a soul was to utter a word. The only thing to be heard was the rhythm of sandals hitting the earth and the steady pace of the priests. On the 7th day, the order would change. On that day, they were to march around the city not once, but 7 times. And at the end of the 7th lap, when the priests blew the trumpets with all their might, the entire nation was to let out a war cry so powerful it would shake the foundations of the world. That, God told him, would be their victory. Imagine the faces of the captains and soldiers when Joshua revealed the plan. March in silence? Blow trumpets and shout? He was asking them to lower their weapons before their most powerful enemy and put their trust in a parade. A murmur of doubt rippled through the ranks. It seemed like madness, a humiliation. But then they looked at Joshua's face. They saw the certainty in his eyes. Joshua spoke to them, not with the logic of a general, but with the unshakable faith of a believer. He reminded them of God's promises. He reminded them how they had crossed the Red Sea and survived the wilderness. He told them this battle would not be fought by human hands, but by the power of God. And one by one, the fear in the Israelites' eyes was replaced by determination. They chose to trust. They chose to obey. And so began the strangest siege in history. At dawn on the first day, the procession formed. Armed warriors led the way, followed by the 7 priests with their trumpets. Then the Ark of the Covenant, the symbol of God's presence. And finally the rest of the army. They left the camp and began the march. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the steady thud of thousands of feet marching in unison. From the walls, the soldiers of Jericho watched them, first with curiosity, then with mockery. They hurled insults and laughed at the bizarre ritual. But the Israelites did not respond. They completed one circuit of the city and returned to their camp in silence. The second day, they did the same, and the third, and the fourth. Every day, the same silent procession. Inside Jericho, the laughter began to turn into nervousness. What kind of strategy was this? The silence of the Israelites was more unsettling than any war cry. Fear, like a tiny seed, began to sprout in the heart of the invincible city. But the adventure doesn't have to end here. You can become an adventure messenger. How? Down below, you'll find the buttons to subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss these fascinating stories from God's Word. In the camp, the faith of Israel was being forged with every step. It is said that a young boy asked his father, "Dad, why are we only walking? Why aren't we fighting?" And the father, placing a hand on his shoulder, whispered back, "Because we are fighting. This is how God taught us to fight, with our feet and with our faith." On the night of the 6th day, the king of Jericho stood atop his wall and shouted that the God of Israel was weak, and his people were cowards who only knew how to walk in circles. But his words, meant to sow fear, only strengthened the resolve of Joshua and his people. They knew the end was near. The anticipation was so thick you could almost touch it. 6 days had passed, and the walls remained intact. The final test of faith was about to arrive. The 7th day dawned before the sun even rose. The atmosphere was electric. There was no doubt or fear, only absolute focus. They began to march. 1 lap, 2 laps, 3. The sun rose high in the sky, and the Israelites kept marching. 4 laps, 5. Sweat poured down their brows, but their steps did not falter. 6 laps. The silence was deeper than ever, as if the entire universe were holding its breath. Then, they began the 7th and final lap. As they walked, Joshua knew the moment had come. They completed the final circle and stopped. A dead silence fell over the field. Joshua raised his hand. In that instant, the 7 priests filled their lungs and blasted the trumpets. A sharp, triumphant sound pierced the air. And following that signal, every man, woman, and child of Israel let out the cry they had held back for 7 days. It wasn't a cry of anger, but a shout of faith, a roar of pure confidence rising from the depths of their souls. And then, the miracle happened. The great walls of Jericho didn't explode outward from the impact of a catapult. They didn't crumble piece by piece. In a way that defied all explanation, the walls sank into the earth as if the ground were swallowing them whole, dissolving into dust and rubble. The path into the city stood wide open. The invincible fortress had fallen without a single Israelite sword ever touching it. The victory was total. But even in the heat of battle, Joshua did not forget a promise. He ordered his men to find Rahab, the woman of Jericho who had helped his spies, and to save her and her entire family. In the midst of God's power, his mercy was also revealed. That day, Joshua ceased to be just Moses' successor. He became the leader who had guided his people to victory through pure faith, and the people of Israel learned a lesson they would never forget. The incredible story of Joshua teaches us that the greatest obstacles in our lives aren't always overcome by our own strength. Sometimes victory requires us to be still, to follow a plan we don't understand, and to trust that God is in control. True faith isn't always logical, but it is always powerful. The strangest and most difficult trials on our path are often the very ones preparing us to receive the greatest blessings. If you enjoyed this adventure of faith and courage, don't forget to like, subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story, and share this with someone who needs to be reminded that no wall is too high for faith. Until next time, brave explorers.